Okay, so this is Hacking the Quarantine with Grafana and Electronics. My name is Yonatan Mevorach. I'm from FedInfra. Last year, just as we were going into quarantine and starting to work from home for the first time, my team launched a new service. And it was important for me to keep tabs on it and see that the metrics are okay. Now in the office, we have these dedicated monitors that we can use to put Grafana Dashboards. And I missed having something like that at home. So one day I was looking at my home office and I noticed that I have this mini arcade machine that we got from Wix Engineering a few years ago that was collecting dust on my desk. So I thought it already has a screen, wouldn't it be cool to convert it into a dashboard? There was only one problem, was that I've never really tinkered with electronics or modified, did any hardware hacking or anything like that. But I decided to try anyway. So what I did is I took another machine from a coworker and I wanted to take it apart just to see if I can understand how it works. So the first thing I did is try to identify the different components. This is what I had lying on my desk, and see if you can figure it out also for yourself. So we have the screen. We have some, I'm not sure exactly how to call it, a board or a circuit that sat below the physical buttons. So I assume it controls the buttons, controls the controls. We have something which is like, I don't know, like a computer or a CPU that powers the arcade machine. I guess that's where the logic is. And we have a battery compartment. So just by identifying the components, I could already get a sense of how the machine works, and I can already start to plan what I'm going to have to keep about the original machine and what I will have to find alternatives for. Because everything that makes the arcade machine an arcade machine, the experience of using it is the form factor, the buttons, and the screen. Everything inside I would have to replace because I wasn't going to reprogram the CPU that's inside. I would need to find something else that I can control. I need an alternative power source because I want it to be always on and not operated by batteries. And obviously the original arcade machine doesn't use the internet, so I would need to find a solution for that as well. So this made me realize that if I bring in a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is the hobbyist computer that's meant to be programmable, very small, and also connects to the internet via Wi-Fi, then ideally I will have everything I need to finish this project, provided that I'm able to create an interface between the Raspberry Pi and the original components of the arcade machine. So I started with the buttons, the controls. This is the board. I took a look at it, tried to understand how it works. I can identify which button is which just by where they physically sit below the buttons which are labeled. And you'll notice there's a series of pins in the middle. And each one of the buttons is connected via this light green path that's printed on the board to one of the components. So, sorry, to one of the pins. So if I follow that path, I'm able to identify which pin controls which button. And the pins is how this board is connected to the rest of the machine inside. You'll also notice that I'm left with one mystery pin. And by doing a bit of Googling, I realized that this is the ground pin. So while this board looks intimidating, after I realized this, I realized that if I take one of the many Hello World examples of connecting a Raspberry Pi to a button, each button here acts as a simple button. And there's lots of getting started guides and code samples on how to connect buttons to Raspberry Pi. So this taught me how I should connect it to the Raspberry Pi, the button to one of the GPIO pins, that's the general purpose input-output, and the ground pin on the board to the ground pin on the Raspberry Pi. Now loaded up with some Hello World code of using a button from Raspberry Pi in Node.js. Oh, sorry. Maybe I was looking at the wrong slide all the time, sorry. You can see that I'm able to react to pressing the button from code. Onto the screen. I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to understand exactly how to interface with the existing screen, so I did a bit of cheating, and I just picked up an identical screen, identical in the same form factor, same inches, but meant to be used with the Raspberry Pi. So that means the manufacturer already supplies instructions on how to connect it to the Raspberry Pi, and also a library to use in your code so you can control from code what is shown on the screen. There's only one problem here. I don't know if you can notice. There's something very problematic about this code. It's not JavaScript, it's Python. And I'm a front-end developer. I have to stay in my lane. So I decided to port the code to Node.js, and I made it available as its own library. And once I did that, I was able to do another POC to make sure that I'm able to control what is shown on the screen from code as well. So this kind of ended my design step, and I was ready to build a machine for real. Then I need to just plan in ahead how I'm going to connect everything, the pins on the Pi, the pins on the controls, and the pins on the screen. So again, the button, just random free GPIO pins on the Pi, and for the screen, according to the instructions of the manufacturer. And now I had to actually build it. So I went on YouTube and I typed how to solder, use a solder iron and a solder. And it's not very difficult. You just need to be careful because it can get quite hot. So that's what you see me doing here. And after that, I'm ready to actually build a machine. So I'm taking it apart, removing the plastic covering, removing the parts I don't need, like the original screen and the original CPU, exposing the wires that connect to the buttons so that I can solder to them later on, soldering everything in place, the screen, and also the Raspberry Pi, using a hot glue gun to put the screen back in place, then sealing it back up. And now I can present to you the Grafana Mini Arcade machine. I can have other apps like the Wix Engineering Conference app to show the schedule for the conference and other things like that. Thank you. I have a dedicated blog post with more details about this project if you want to check it out. Thank you.